Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Lobo Pack Podcast. What you're about to hear is part 2 of the interview with MAJ Raschel, the Army Space Operations Officer. So, since you came back from flight training and basically you were doing as much as you could on the guard to just try to get hours, was your ultimate goal then to just fly an airline, sir?
No, I mean, it was at one time, and I wanted to do it, but, it's kind of like the cost of it is was kind of a deterrent in that, which was for a lot of people. And then the thought of like, hey, am I going to actually have a job? Are the airlines even hiring, etc. And I loved flying. I loved flying the Black Hawk. It was, and I loved what I was doing, I loved the people that I worked with, it was a great community to work in, and I was full time, so I was pretty content. I was pretty content with what I was doing, and I could have done a very long and finished my career there. I could have taken command and gone on to battalion command and maybe even eventually be the facility commander and the state Army aviation officer, etc. Become an instructor pilot and a maintenance test pilot, and have prerequisites for a lot of stuff. Some things changed for me over time. And I got some other opportunities and I went that route, which was the best option for me and my family, and that's one of those like 5-year plans that I was talking about. It's, things change. I had a tour in Afghanistan in 2017 with Sota Fe. I was attached to 7th Special Forces Group. I was their aviation liaison and their MEDOP S3. So I was the guy that coordinated all their air assets for missions out there, and it had become train assist, and advise command at that time. And so, we had ODAs all over Afghanistan as the Sota Fe, and that's who I supported. I coordinated for their missions as part of their CONOP planning processes to develop not only their medevac plans, but also to help coordinate their air assets. Airlift transport, or airstrike type stuff. I work closely with those guys. On the fire side, not the fire side, but it was called CJ SOAC. It was the Combined Joint Special Operations Aviation Command or something like that. But so I did a bit of that. But
how'd you get that opportunity? Was that something that came over the net? Hey, got
it came through the guard. 7th Group, they were getting ready to deploy. They were the battalion in charge. This was, they had some other group detachments to them. They had a 1st group and I want to say 5th group, and then there was also, I want to say their 19th group. They were National Guard. It's been a long time, but so they actually were doing their pre-mission training down in Fort Bliss, and Bliss medevac they weren't able to support during that time, so they contacted the New Mexico Guard, and a lot of times we did support active duty. Because, they have like various things down south, like in not only Bliss, White Sands Missile Range. Like I've landed at the Trinity site taking VIPs down there. I've flown through White Sands Missile Range. Flown right over the spaceport down there, which is pretty cool. They needed medevac support down there, so they tasked me as the OIC, took 3 Black Hawk medevac crews down there over like a 10 or 12 day period, something like that. And we supported them. And so he's also a ROTC alumni from here, Captain Templar Horry, retired now. He was enlisted for a long time before he came to the ROTC. But we kind of would swap out in their jock, working with them, and then we'd go, one of us would be in there supporting them as like a liaison, and then the other one would be out flying missions and stuff.
Okay, cool.
So it was just simulating their missions, doing medevac support, and so we do simulated medevac missions for them and stuff like that to help train them up before they went to Afghanistan. So it's similar to like JRTC or ATC, right? And I had mentioned to the fires officer. He was actually from Albuquerque originally. He was also I forget the FA designation, but functional area JTAC. I was like, man, that's so cool, man. I wish I could go with you guys. He was like, well, you want to go? And so they invited me to go because they needed an aviation liaison. And I was like, okay, yeah, absolutely. And so I got released from the state to do. So I deployed with them as an individual MOB augmentee. And that is an opportunity for any National Guard or reservist. They can go on a site called Tour of Duty, and they can look at deployment opportunities. I mean, you can find tours at the Pentagon or, general's aids, stuff like that. But you can really diversify your OER and do something other than just what you are traditionally used to, and that's a great resource for people. You have to access it with on a government computer. You can't access it from home anymore. But it's a great resource if you want deployment opportunities or to go places. I just happened to be invited after mentioning that I wish I could go with them or whatever. We had a great working relationship over that period. I was like, man, this is awesome. I wish I could do something like this. And they were like, well, yeah. I was like, dude, we'd love to have you. Work great with you. And so that's how I ended up going. I deployed as a individual through Fort Bragg. I was by myself and flew all the way to Afghanistan by myself, and then flew all the way home by myself. So it was a very unique opportunity that I had gotten to support them out there. But it was very rewarding and a absolutely phenomenal experience. And that's actually where I found out about the FA-40.
Was there somebody already there doing that job? You're like, oh, hey, what do you do? Or
yeah,
like that?
Yeah, and so he there was an Army Space Support Team there, and the OIC, and he's now a friend of mine, and we're actually in the same unit now, which is it was kind of ironic. It's a small world. There's actually two guys that I work with now. They were both on that support team, and that I work with on the FA-40 side. So I had never heard of it, and we kind of knew each other in passing over there. Man, that'd be really cool. I've always been fascinated by that stuff, and so I talked to them a little bit. And they kind of indirectly inspired me to kind of look into it. And when I got back from Afghanistan, things were not like they were before I left. There was kind of a transition, and not just there, but also in my personal life, that I decided it was time for a change. And at that time, they were coming out with rotor transition programs with the airlines. And so I made my wife and I made a choice for me to go in the IRR. And I did that. I got hired at an airline, they helped. At that time, they were helping to pay for your add-ons. And then you had a guaranteed job, and then you had a training contract with them.
And that was through Delta, or was that
no? This was
else?
Through a regional airline, and they don't exist anymore. So they shut down at the beginning of the pandemic. So I've worked with them for a couple of years, and so I was in the IRR for about just over a year. So I lost a year toward retirement, unfortunately. And I think it's actually 2 years for retirement. So I got to do 22, 23 years if I want to retire. But I'm at 19 this coming January, which is fine because being enlisted, and commissioned, it'll give me up for 05 years. So I'll be able to retire as an 05 with
awesome
3 years, 3 years at that rank, that grade. And, so I was looking for a position. I was working with in the RR, you still get retirement points. You get 15 for just being a member. And you can actually volunteer. I was looking at, coming in volunteering here actually at the time, talking to Mr. Savini at the time about coming in volunteering and getting just the points because you got to get 50 points a year in the reserve component in order to have a good year toward retirement. And then your cumulative points is what your retirement in your pay grade is what you get in retirement when you turn whatever your eligible age is. And it starts, I think, at 59 and a half. In the reserves, you can get it. But if you have qualifying deployments or qualifying active duty time, you can get it as soon as 50, I want to say. So I can get it at 58 because of the Title 10 time that I have. I have a lot more active duty time, but Title 32 doesn't count toward that, unfortunately. I did several years of counter drug support on orders, doing border missions and stuff. But and then the MEPS, that was also a Title 32 story. So even though it was active duty, you're paid the same. Everything's the same as active duty. It's not qualifying time toward getting your retirement sooner in the reserve component. Just for I made that transition, and I was working with an Army career manager in the IRR. There's regional career managers, for the IRR all throughout the country. And so whatever region you live in, you're assigned to them. And I told him, I was like, hey, I'm interested in this FA-40 thing. I'd like to get apply for it, because it's not something that you can just say, hey, I want to do it, raise your right hand, and you can go. There's a selection process, and so he talked to the powers that be, figured out who he needed to talk to, and I had to do like a military bio, a military resume, and I had to go through like an interview process. And then I only had a secret clearance, so I had to go through the process to get a TSSCI as well. So I did all of that. I got selected, and I've been with them ever since. So since 2020, I drilled remotely for a year because of the pandemic, but I've been physically with them now since 2021. And I work as the branch chief of training for Joint Reserve Unit under U.S. Space Comm. So really what I do is I create training curriculums for not only mandatory training, service specific, because we have Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines, but we also have like mandatory training that's pushed down from the combatant command, Space Comm. And then we also have like different training requirements for like, all personnel that come in, because not everybody is space, but, most people they have some sort of space background, and it's pretty top heavy, like rank wise unit. Our lowest ranking NCO is an E6. We don't have any lower enlisted, and officer wise, like the lowest ranking we've had is like a first lieutenant, but it's usually captain or above. So we have a 04 Mafia, a lot of majors, and actually quite a few lieutenant colonels that are in my unit on the Army side as well. Most of us are FA-40s. My job specifically there, I teach like orbital mechanics and DoD space missions.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about, you'd gone through the selection process. What's sort of the basic schools that you had to go to initially to get into your unit?
I was required to do Space 100, which was also the prerequisite for SOC-UC, which is the Space Operations Officer Qualification course, which is how you become, of course, that you go to become a Army Space Operations Officer, SA. Space 100, it's like kind of basically what I teach, basic orbital mechanics, the different orbits and the different space missions. It kind of ties in like why certain assets are in certain orbits. They're in those orbits because they have a specific mission, specific purpose. Because the Army is the largest user of space assets.
Okay.
And I can give you an example. That's everything from using a dagger on the ground, handheld GPS, GPS in your Humvees, LMTVs, all your ground vehicles, airplanes using GPS. And then even with Blue Force Tracker uses GPS as well, tracking troops on the ground, knowing where your people are, right?
So with all those capabilities, is there just a more growing demand for the need of space officers just about everywhere in the Army? Or
Not necessarily.
So what are you seeing, sir?
So, we typically are at every level echelon of command, right? All the way up to division, So what an Army Space Operations Officer does is we reach out to these different entities, and we take that nerdy space speak of these assets and capabilities and turn it so that Ground Forces Commander understands what assets they have available. Pre-9/11, Space Comm existed. There's a combatant, right? And then it went away, and it had a lot of space assets under it. All those space assets were rolled up under STRATCOM post 9/11. But, Army Space Operations Officer existed in the early 2000s, which a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't even know that we have Army astronauts. But, it's like, as time progressed, the Army has had the Space and Missile Defense Command, which you can actually go to their website to learn about FA-40s and how you can get selected, what it's all about, what a functional area is. It'll explain all of that. And you can just type in Army Space Operations Officer or FA-40, and you'll find the U.S. Space and Missile Defense Command website, and you can Google it on your phone and find out all about it. Kind of circle back is like, if there is a branch detail available for that. So you do 4 years in your, the requirement as a cadet, you'd have to do like 4 years, I want to say, in whatever your branch detail is, and then you can actually go to become an FA-40 if you're selected in that. But there are specific requirements with it. I believe there's like STEM-based degree program, science, technology, engineering, mathematics type degree programs that like would require you to go into that. Or if you have a space background, that's another thing. There's various ways to become an FA-40. It's just a matter of whatever path you have to take to get there, right? If you want to do it. But, so FA-40s have been around, and it's evolved obviously over time. But when space started becoming more of a contested area, which it wasn't necessarily before, but it is now. Our assets are potentially at risk, right? So we have to protect that. The Army, protects the ground. The Air Force protects the air. The Navy protects the sea. Space protects everything from 100 nautical miles above the surface of the Earth and everything beyond that, right? The whole purpose of Spacecom. The Space Force were already Air Force and actually Army personnel that already existed. They basically made into the Space Force, so they have more dedicated funding, but they're kind of similar to like how the Marine Corps is Department of the Navy, Space Force is Department of the Air Force, right? So it's still their own branch now, but they were former Air Force personnel that were already doing that mission. It's just more dedicated now. And a lot of what they do is they manage the majority of DoD's satellites in space. So there's a ground segment, there's a link segment, and a space segment. They manage the ground segment and they monitor what's called like the TT&C, the telemetry, tracking, and health command in overall health of the satellite, right? Because there are limits to how long they can continue to operate because stuff breaks. Right? And so that's kind of their mission set. The Army has a role which has kind of gone back and forth, like on whether that's going to end up going to the Space Force or not. But Army Space and Missile Defense Command, missile defense, missile warning, stuff like that, right? I don't think I have to really say much more than that. But the Army is very well integrated into space. We have entire space brigades dedicated to space support teams, Army space support teams, which are commanded by majors that are like unique units that can go and augment big units all over the world for different types of operations. And for lack of an FA-40 being assigned to like a ground forces commander, that's what the Army Space Support Team does. And we go in there and there's enlisted personnel that are space soldiers, for lack of better words. And they provide that expertise to that command team, just like anything else, like CBRN, like anything that we don't typically do. It's a special skill set and that requires special training. And that's what an FA, a functional area, is. It provides a special skill set that you wouldn't get from a traditional branch. But, it's kind of unique. Functional areas are also unique in the sense that you maintain your basic branch. So I'm still an aviation officer, but I'm also an FA-40, so I have a functional area in Army Space Operations. So I can go back to aviation if I want to. I don't have to stay in Army space. Promotion-wise, like you can typically make it to 05 without even having to take a command in an FA-40. Can't say that that's going to happen. Obviously, you have to have all your PME done, etc. But there's a lot of FA-40s that end up not even taking command, and they end up retiring as 05. But there is that command opportunity. So if I wanted to take command of an Army Space Support Team, or I got the opportunity to go back to aviation, take command of a medevac unit as an 04, that's where it's a little bit unique to a traditional Army unit, where a company commander is a captain, right? Special Forces is kind of special skill set. Again, they're the commander of what a company would be is actually a major as well. And their platoon leaders are captains. And that's how it is on the Army space and our Army aviation as well. So they're a bit unique to what a traditional Army.
Yeah, that's really awesome that there are so many opportunities in it. How many space support teams are there? Was there just like a handful?
I mean, there's like an entire brigade. They're all located in Colorado, from my understanding. But there's a lot of things that you have to begin to need to know, right? That's
right. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know everything. I wouldn't even begin to. I admit I don't even begin to scratch the surface on even a fifth of all the knowledge that's out there when it comes to Army space and. I have a basic understanding, and that's kind of like where I'm at with it. But, there's a lot of opportunity within Army space, and then if you, with like any career path, like if you hit a roadblock, there's other opportunities you can go to, right? It opens a new door, especially if you're passionate about it. These courses are not easy. Like SOC-UC, it's a graduate level course. It's not, I highly recommend before you getting into it, having a bit of experience briefing, having at a minimum CCC complete the captain's career course complete before you go to that course, because it, a lot of people fail out of it. It is a graduate level course. It requires you actually get credit-wise, military arts credits close to half of a master's degree.
Really? Wow, that's
Yeah.
insane.
Through various universities. Middle is one of them in space operations. Like half of the master's degree toward, half the credit hours you need toward master's degree.
How long is that course?
7 weeks.
It's 7 weeks. Okay.
Yeah. So
And
that's
then-
pretty good for getting like half of a master's degree in 7
Yeah.
weeks. But
Can you go into the other intricacies or tell us a little bit more about the course? Other than, it's a graduate level course and stuff like that, or is all of that stuff you can't talk about?
I mean, I think what I can talk about it is it's a higher level, clearance. And so it's not like you can take the material home with you to study it. So you have to study it in the classroom, and you have to brief things that you're not used to, information that you just learned, things that you might not be familiar with. And you have to be able to tie it all in together to build a picture to brief to, an 06 or above. When you brief your mission, you're given a scenario, and you have to develop like a framework for that, and you have to brief it and provide a solution to that higher level of command. Right. So that's the other thing is you're going to be briefing. Typically, as an FA-40, you could be briefing, generals all the way up, right? And you want to keep that in mind that you're expected to be able to do that. And so they give you 10 minutes to do your briefing. If you go over by 1 second, then you fail and you have to redo it. There's three tests that you have to take. Like if you fail, I think it's more than 2, then you potentially could fail out of the course. There are repeat tests that you could take, but only up to that point. And then there comes a point where it's like, does your command want you to continue to go through that course? If they do, then they might give you another opportunity to take the test, but no more failures. Because if you fail another something else, then you're getting pulled. Because there's it can be fairly competitive, and it's not an easy course to go through. But any Army branch can go through it. We actually we have Marine Corps also goes through that course. We have several Marines in our course. So you do get the space badge, which is much bigger than the Army Aviation.
Yeah.
Because it's Air Force. It's an Air Force badge, but you get the Army Space Badge from that course. It also qualifies as your AOC, which is like the second phase you need to be able to get promoted to colonel after.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So if you pass that course, and you don't no longer have to do an AOC. You can do your ILE, and then you're qualified. So you can set yourself up for success. And there's a lot of other opportunities with it. Like there's the defense strategy course. You have to have a master's degree. It's one of those where you have to have a master's degree already to get into it, but you get the joint service credit from it. And so I actually know a guy, he got double BZ promoted to lieutenant colonel, a year before his BZ, because of his joint service credit and all the accolades that he had. The dude's my hero. But yeah, I mean, there's some hard chargers out there, and there's a lot of opportunities with it. And he's also an Army aviator and FA-40, and he's been able to bounce back and forth from space command to aviation commands, and he's currently a brigade commander for Army Reserve Aviation Brigade. Positive that guy will be a general someday.
Insane, yeah.
And he's also a Delta pilot.
You said you fly for Delta, Colonel?
I currently fly for Delta.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when did you step into that role, sir?
Well, like we talked about, 2017, I started the transition training, the add-on ratings to go to the airlines. Went to, from 2018 to 2020, I flew for a regional airline. Got down at the beginning of the pandemic. I was a captain there, an airline captain there when they shut down. And, the goal is typically at that time, you had to get 1,000 hours of Part 121 PIC time as a captain in the regionals before big airlines would even look at you. But because they shut down, I was cut short, and I actually got hired at a company called Atlas. They're worldwide phenomenal company. They have the largest fleet of 747s in the world. 767s and then 777s. I mean, I flew at the time, they don't have them anymore. I flew the 737 and I got the 74 type rating before I left. I got hired at Delta from there. Now I was there for almost 3 years. They're the largest DoD contractor as well for transporting troops all over the world. They're considered a ACMI carrier, which is they provide aircraft crew maintenance and insurance for big organizations like the DoD, right? And so They typically used to fly into Afghanistan, into Kandahar and Bagram, fly into places, crazy places, and like, you know, well, not all of Africa is crazy, but some of the crazy places in Africa, it's kind of dangerous and stuff. But they fly to over 300 destinations in the world, fly military um, personnel and their families all over the world. There's other companies out there, like when I went to Afghanistan, I flew on a company called Omni. So these are all companies that a lot of people are probably familiar with, having flown on them somewhere in the world, military wise, especially PCSing too. Japan or Korea or, Europe and stuff. Typically will fly on an Atlas plane.
Hmm.
That the that was a great experience. I loved it there, but when you get hired at a legacy airline, the big three, you typically don't want to turn that down because it's a great quality.
I was wondering, is it super competitive to get into that, or has there been? Because I feel like there's a big, at least from what I hear, there's not enough airline pilots, so that's why they're trying to give more. They're trying to throw money at or make certain programs to try to get people more interested. Is that true? Or
that is true. And not as much so as it was pre-pandemic. There was a pretty significant pilot shortage, and there still is, but just not to the extent.
Okay.
Because when the pandemic hit, it kind of changed a lot of things, as we all know. Everything from air traffic control to aviation to military and other civilian careers, right? It's not just the airlines. I think we're short by like 2 million engineers worldwide. And at one point we were short somewhere around 80,000 pilots worldwide. But post pandemic, when I don't think the airlines were prepared for it because there was a lot of aircraft that were retired, they're aging out, and they were sitting. So that's always an issue. Like, things tend to break when they sit, right? And so, a lot of aircraft were retired. But like Boeing and Airbus, they got really behind on aircraft deliveries, and they're still behind, and they're trying to catch up and delivering aircrafts. Not only was there less aircraft available post pandemic, but there was a pilot shortage as well. So a lot of the big airlines have hired massive amounts of pilots, basically gutted the regional airlines, and they're finally getting back to normal staffing at the regionals as well, because a lot of people are going through the pipeline, go through the regional airlines, or coming from the military. Typically, if you're a fixed wing aviator in the military, you could typically get hired directly to like Delta, United, or American. But like Army rotor pilots, or even Air Force and Navy rotor pilots, most of us, and Marine Corps, like most of us have had to go through the regional airlines to get that fixed wing experience. Part 121 is what they call it. FAR, Federal Aviation Regulation Part 121, is what the airlines fall under. We typically have to go to the regionals, get experience before we can even be considered for legacy airlines. Yes, it can be very competitive, but there are programs like Delta Propel, United Aviate, as well as American Flight Academy, which are pipelines essentially to those airlines. So you go fly for their subsidiary airlines, and then over a period of time, and level of flight experience, then you basically flow directly to those airlines and spend the rest of your career there. Typically, most people get hired outside of those programs from a regional airline, and it doesn't matter which one. Typically, you go to the one that calls you first, which Delta is typically the hardest one to get hired on. Their application process was more difficult than the SFA for a top secret.
Really? Wow.
They're very, very thorough. You go through a psych eval and take multiple personality tests and aptitude stuff. You go through an HR interview as well, and you usually don't get hired your first time around. It's usually your second time interviewing, with them historically. But they were the last ones I thought would call me, and they were the first ones to call. So that's why I ended up there, which I'm extremely grateful for.
And then, are you out of the Sunport that's here in Albuquerque, or do you know different?
No, as an airline pilot, we have flight benefits, so we can fly. Like, we have commuter policies, so we can commute to any. We can commute anywhere. We can commute on any airline for free. It's on.
Oh, really? Oh,
and
wow.
You can also sit in the flight deck. There's a jump seat and fold down and sit in the front to commute to work and commute home. So I'm based out of LAX.
Oh, okay.
So all my trips start and end out of LA, and so I fly domestic and international. So depending on the trip, I may be flying across the country and then bouncing back and forth from Atlanta to Florida, or the next trip I'm in Europe. if, flying to Europe, or next trip I might be in Japan, in Hawaii. So it's a phenomenal career. So post-military service, or, if you're National Guard or Reserves, anybody that wants to do it, I highly recommend you be passionate about it to do it. Don't do it just for the money. It's not all about that. You want to be passionate about what you do, because you're not gonna like it otherwise. Because it's a bit of time away. You live in a hotel for like half the year, but you get a lot of time off too. So, it can be a really really good quality of life, not only time off wise, but financially and benefits wise. So fly all over the world on vacation if you want for free.
That's awesome, sir.
So you get flight benefits for your family too, so it's a great career field, especially for those of us service members that, are looking for a career outside of the military, whether you just do your initial commitment, or you are Guard or Reserve, you need a civilian career, or you retire from the military. It's a great place to be.
Do you have any, I would say, words of advice for the cadets going through the program now, as they're about to graduate, going off in the Army, whether that be the National Guard or active duty?
Absolutely. It doesn't matter which component you go into. My first sergeant, I told you earlier, was a great mentor to me, right? He told me, he's like, sir, he's like, as a platoon leader, and this has been proven to me time and time again. Even as an XO, an operations officer, and every position that I've been in, and then being a platoon leader myself, when you get to your first unit, nobody likes to hear a lieutenant say, in my experience, whether you have prior enlisted experience or not, that they might look at that differently. But nobody in the military wants to hear that. You know what I mean? Doing primarily is setting your rank aside and go and work with your people, get to know them, get to know what it is that they need to do their job, right? Because they're the backbone of whatever branch you're in, right? Or MOSQ. Don't learn their job to tell them how to do their job, because as a platoon leader, you are the soldier's advocate to the commander. You are the person that can get them the resources that they need to be successful in their job, right? And you have to be able to take care of people. You can set yourself apart by being that person. And also with your peers. Like, there's a way to go about things. I've made many mistakes throughout my career. I was a hard charger. I've been called an overachiever at times. And it always pissed me off, really, and I could have gone about things in a different way. And I learned that the hard way, and it turned out really well. We're all a team, right? You're not there to compete against each other. Who's going to get a better OER block? Really, our job is to take care of people, and you can learn from anybody, no matter how old you are, how much experience you have, etc. Right? Just be open-minded. Like, we get stuck inside the box. I call it the inside of the box mentality. Don't be afraid to take a step outside the box and look at the big picture and see what the team needs, not what you need as an individual, but what the team needs. You need to learn how to work in a team, right? And your fellow platoon leaders that's your team. You can learn from each other. You can make things better together. You can all shine, right? And once you get to the XO level and, company command level, pay that forward. If you're successful, leave whatever it is that you do better than it was when you got it. Don't have that mentality that's like, oh, that's how it was when I was in that position, so that's what you're going to have to deal with. You can make things better for your people, because really, you are the top cover for your soldiers to be able to do their job in any mission, no matter what you do. Make it better than what you got, and then pay it forward by instilling that into the people below you. And we'll have a better service for it. We were all working hard. We were all doing great things, and he proceeded to show me all of his awards, his military awards. I'm like, oh, cool, sir. That's cool. He never once put me in for an award, in the over 2 years that he was my commander. He never once put anybody in for an award, yet he has all of his awards. And, it's not about you, right? Nobody's going to remember who you are when you leave the service, unless you make it up to, maybe general ranks and you do great things like Silver Star, Medal of Honor recipient, but at the end of the day, like, leave it better than when you got it, and you will be successful that way. You will get OERs, you will get noticed, and you will do great things, and you'll have a much happier time in the military. This is not for everybody. Some people go into it and they do it for a few years and they're just like miserable and they're like, this is not for me, and they get out and move on. Which is what they should do, right? You shouldn't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid to make changes in your career. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Sometimes it's as simple as just picking up a phone and making a phone call. Like, hey, do we have to, a perfect example. It's like historically we've always ADAG out of like when we mobbed like folding aircraft blades and put them on C-17s or whatever and flying to do a mission somewhere, right? Historically, we always ADAG'd out of Port Bliss with the New Mexico Guard, and we're like, yeah, we can't do it out of Kirtland. We can't do it out of Kirtland. Well, I picked up the phone and I asked them, hey, can we ADAG out of there? Do you have the resources to do it? Oh, absolutely, you can do it. So instead of having to drive all the way down from Santa Fe all the way down to Texas, the New Mexico border, we only had to come down to Kirtland. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's the other thing I want to kind of impart on people is, regulations. There's a reason why they're there. There's mandatory words. Will, shall, or must, right? Everything else is like, recommended, like should, right? It's an example of that. The regulations give us left and right limits. It's not the end all be all. There's gray areas within the regs, right? But what those gray areas are, those are the commander's discretion to make decisions, right? Make things happen. There's no reason to take illegal orders, but there's a reason why the regs are there. Just because it's what Platoon Daddy said, he learned it from a reg 20 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever. I'm joking. We call him Platoon Daddy. Doesn't mean that that's the way it is now. Regs change continuously throughout the years. So don't be afraid to get into the reg and read the full paragraph. And there might be, and understand how they work, what a DAPAM versus an FM is versus like what an AR is, etc. Army Publishing Directorate will be a great friend to you. You get in there. Those are the most current regs. Don't just Google it and find a form that's on some random website. Go to Army Publishing Directorate and get the most current. Make sure it's not an out of date regulation. Even if you download it to your desktop, like there could be a newer version, right? So if you do that, not only will you keep yourself out of trouble, you'll keep your people out of trouble, and you'll keep your commander out of trouble. And then when you are the commander, if you impart that on your people, they'll keep you out of trouble too. And that's all I have to say.
Definitely, sir. Now you really hit on everything. The biggest thing is trying to get the cadets, making them take it seriously, so then they could be great officers one day. But again, sir, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And listening.